Welcome to the Stabcast, a podcast dedicated to Star Wars Legion.
Arrest thy maid.
Welcome, cadets and commanders, to the Stabcast, the Sunsphere Tactical Attack Brigade's Legion podcast. I am Will, not at Gen Con Heim, with Ben, why is this world so cruel, Fowler, and Ryan, winner of some stuff, Slowoski. How are we doing today, gentlemen?
I'm doing good. It's a nice Saturday out.
Just here admiring my cool painting awards. It's great. Doing well.
So it begins.
This week on Stabcast, battle reports from our fun at Gen Con, a continued look at pre-game decision-making, and much, much more, but never a conversation about painting.
So guys, a little thing happened while between our episodes. What's a Gen Con?
Yeah, we got to go to what used to be Generations Con, now commonly known as Gen Con in Indianapolis, Indiana, where I want to say they topped 70,000 people this year. 70,000 nerds got together and played every which kind of game for 4 days. Whatever your cup of nerd tea is, they probably served a bathtub of it. This is my 4th Gen Con. Ben, you've been coming for a little while too. What Gen Con is this for you?
This is 2 in a row, but then I went just about 12 years ago. So this is my 3rd overall Gen Con.
Okay. So yeah, we went to Indy spent a long weekend, ate a lot of good food, met a lot of cool people, played, between the two of us, quite a few games. Some of us played a bigger variety of games than others.
You had to put a title on it. Exactly how many different games did you play?
How many different games did I play? 2. I played 2. We played that Jurassic Park game.
That's true, we did.
That was it. It was Legion and the weird Jurassic Park game.
I'm not even going to ask.
Well, it's a conversation for another time. Yeah, needless to say, I got to play a bunch of Legion. Ben got to play some Legion and some other stuff too. So Ben, Gen Con was a 4-day event. My crew got to go up Wednesday night, and we got to check out the in-flight report, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. And then it was, for me, it was 3 days of Legion, and it was Ben had a whole slew of other things that he could do.
Yeah, I had a day of Legion, a day of X-Wing, a Saturday filled with demo games, and then Sunday was just mostly a shopping spree and more demo games.
So in the interest of times, obviously we want to give you guys like a feel of what Legion at Gen Con was like. But normally when we go and we play an event, we do battle reports for every round because it's usually a smaller showing. I am not going to do 13 battle reports for you all. I think Ben's going to talk through his, since he only got to play one of the Maximum Firepower events. He's going to talk through his day, and then I'm going to give you guys like a little tidbit or a little bit of feel for each of my days in Legion, because I met way too many people, didn't write down enough of their names or where they're from, and I'll give the highlights of each of my days at Legion. So Ben, how was your first day of at Gen Con?
First day Gen Con was actually a lot of fun. Legion didn't start until about 11, like 55-ish. I think we were supposed to start at 11. So, but I'm used to games that start at 8:30. So we have to get up early. We have to eat breakfast, get down there. And this was a nice, gentle start. I played Legion day 1. I was looking at Leah and Luke, push with reflexes, 3 troopers with Z6s and extra guys, a 4-man trooper set, and then 2 loaded fleets with shotguns and concussion grenades, a rotary ATRT and a flame ATRT, and I was hoping those boys were going to take me all the way to the top and go 4-0. Didn't quite happen, but it was close. It was close. First round out, as has always happened to me at every major event I've ever traveled to, I will play someone who rode in the car with me.
Yep.
Doesn't matter if there's 200 players, if there's 130 players, if there's 21 players. I will find someone who rode in my car, and I will play them in the first 3 rounds. So round 1, I played Tim. Tim and I played a couple weeks ago. I think it was actually on our last podcast I talked about it. We both had a lot of fun. He rolled 5 natural blocks once on an attack that I thought was just beautiful. It was going to wipe out a squad. I declared him to be an enemy of the podcast, so he's a dear friend. Tim's playing Veers, 4 Stormtroopers, 2 Snows, and 2 Bikes. I was going to see a lot of variations on that list with Veers, Troopers, and then Bikes all over the place. Every game I played, all 4 of them, I had advanced position and nearly minefield every time. Like that was the deployment I got. I think minefield 3 out of the 4 times. And I really like it. The more I put minefield on the table, sometimes it hurts me, sometimes it doesn't. but I love the decision making it forces on players. Sometimes the mines don't explode.
Yeah, I got to play Minefield quite a bit this weekend too. I think part of it was the novelty. A lot of people hadn't gotten a lot of games under their belt, so they wanted to experience it. So they let it go through when maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't have. I also think Minefield is really great for Rebel players. I think it doesn't necessarily. I'm not going to say it's just flat out better for Rebels, but I do think it can be less challenging for them depending on where it's placed.
So with my game against Tim, we're playing Recover Supplies. I pick up 2 boxes, I shoot some things down. He picks up 2 boxes, I shoot one out, and then suddenly I've got 3 boxes, and the game comes to a great conclusion. So then after that, I play round 2. I played against Bill. He's playing Vader, double bikes, and all the troopers you can find. Advanced positions, rapid reinforcements, and breakthrough on this one. He had some great shots. To be honest with you, I thought I was going to lose that game. But I sent a Skywalker right into some bikes, killed them real fast. I had my rotary knock Vader right off the table from a distance. I reinforced my rear to make sure that I could knock out any troopers who were coming my way. And I rushed up the middle, put 3 guys on his side, and he had 1 on my side and took the win on that one too. So his last re-rolls on defense weren't great. So that kind of helped me out.
So you used rapid reinforcements as a defensive tool in Breakthrough rather than just the drop some dudes in for free victory points?
No, I dropped a dude in for free victory points, but then I kept Luke in my backfield.
Oh, okay.
Because Luke can clean up pretty easy.
Yeah, he can. He's pretty good at that.
So when he appeared, I knocked out some troopers and then ran towards him. My ATRTs did a lot of work. The Flamers pressed hard, and most of my opponents were very afraid of them or shot them very quickly, trying to knock them down, which freed up my other guys to do things. So they're either roaming shields or they're pressure cookers on on my opponents. See, for game 3, it was against the eventual winner, Nick Freeman. Nick's playing Veers, 4 sets of troopers, 2 snows, and a giant ATST with all the toys. My list didn't have a lot of impact on it. In fact, I think it had none outside of the shotgun troopers. No, and those guys have Pierce, so no, I guess I had none. It was a rough game. From the very beginning, I knew I wasn't going to win. I was in a downside spot. His advanced positions, we had Minefield, and it was the bane of all the red players. I had exactly, I think, 800 points. It was key positions. There's been a couple posts on the Legion Facebook group during Gen Con, and a thing on Reddit or 2 where I explained exactly how this sets up. Nick had the initiative. Key positions came up in the 3rd spot. So there's no way I can veto it. And when you can't veto that, I'm like, okay, what can I do? All my deployment options allowed him to very quickly get to the key position. The layout of the terrain allowed him to place them right next to each other. So he could just put up 2 troopers and the ATST and Veers and anyone else who wanted to join the party and stand behind 2 barricades and defend them. The boards were thin. If you've been paying attention to what's going on the Facebook pages, the Thursday day boards were awfully thin. And so I didn't have much cover trying to approach, and it was just going to be a bloodbath. Nick's a cool dude. We actually had a really fun game. We were nice and relaxed. When it was the 3rd game, this game that meant things. But he and I both realized nothing could be done by, getting salty. So we enjoyed ourselves. We had a lot of fun. Take out some pictures from Instagram. They're all in there. Oh, Lord, the minefield on this one. We could not get a minefield to explode both on his side or my side. So if you read the card, you've got to roll a red die in order to activate it. Somehow he and I came up blank 3 or 4 times. I had an ATRT that I just moved kind of back and forth. Like I took the flamer because I couldn't get close enough to use the flamer on his troopers in key position. So I'm like, I will just dance on the minefield just to get it out of the way of my guys. Could not get it to explode. I sent some troopers. Could not get it to explode. I finally, because I have to advance, I put my rotary ATRT up there. It explodes, but now it's done damage to 3 different units. It was the grossest thing possible. Nick advanced up on his positions where, of course, I put a mine. His first 2 sets of troopers didn't trigger it. Veers finally had to trigger it, but he got a little bit luckier with his dice rolls. I didn't make Nick play the entire round. I didn't give up on him. I feel it's unfair to the next opponent to have a fresh Nick who gets to go out and relax for about an hour or so. So I made him roll all the dice, made him think every decision through. But it was a good game. Like I said, Nick's a great guy, and I thoroughly enjoyed ourselves. I saw him for the rest of the weekend because he also played Legion every day. So I lost that game. So it puts me at 2-1. So going to my final game, I'm playing against Justin. I'm back on the map I played in the second game. He's playing 3 bikes, Veers, all of his troopers. And we were playing, wait for it, advanced positions, minefield, and capture supplies. It was a fantastic game. Even though I knew I wasn't getting the invite to Adepticon, he knew he wasn't getting the invite to Adepticon, so it was fun. My fleet's held the center of the board there. If you take a look at Instagram, I've got a picture of it. My ATRTs placed themselves in harm's way in the middle and right on his board edge, so he really couldn't advance towards it. Luke grabbed a set of boxes, 2 troopers grabbed boxes, and then they booked it to my back line. And my fleet troopers just stood in the middle and said, "Come at me, bro, come at me." And it was just fantastic. So when he finally decided to come at me, like the French at Verdun, like the Filipinos at Tirad Pass, like the Maratha army at Parvakine, like the Spartans before them at Thermopylae, my fleet troopers shouted, "On ne passe pas," or in the words of Gandalf the Grey, "None shall pass." They all died, but they held on long enough that by round 6, I had the victory. So I ended up 3-1 on the day. I tied with second and third place players. They were all 3-1 as well. But because my first round and second round players eventually dropped, I had a lower strength of schedule. And I understand that's how we win. And Ryan and I have had this conversation before. I mean, I was fourth. So I get it. Their players stayed a little bit longer. They played a little bit more. Don't know how I feel about that, but I also don't know how to fix it. So my one sweet prizes, you can find them all on the Instagram, I think, as well. My opponents loved me so much that I won the Sportsmanship Award of acrylic damage tokens. Hey, Ryan, do you have any acrylic damage tokens?
Nope. Do you have a painting award?
Sweet victory. We'll talk about that later. In fact, I think I said at the beginning, we're not talking about that at all. That's not true. The judges called for a painting contest, and somehow I got nominated in the top 4. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. I did not expect to win any painting contest. I was going up against Dustin Harvey, who is of the a friend of the podcast with Jagged Brush Studios. One of the players had a light up a lightsaber, which was amazing. So there's no way I'm going to win against that. They're really good painters, but it was judged by FFG Organized Play. It's judged by the developer. It's judged by the Organized Play judges. And they probably spent 35, 40 minutes really grilling over all these models. And I was like, oh my. I did get 4th, which I'll take as an honorable mention. There was no physical prize for that, but Wade touched my models. So Ryan, I don't know if Wade touched your models, but he's touched my models.
Nope. It's okay, though.
Dustin Harvey, Jagged Brush Studios, won first place on Thursday. I was super happy. I had a lot of fun. The event ran a little late, so I missed my Model UN 120-player RPG in which aliens may or may not have infiltrated the world. Ryan may not have been one of them. He went, so he may give us stories about it. But that was my day of Legion. It was fantastic. I had lots of fun. Ryan, how was your day of Legion?
So I'm going to do, like I said earlier, a little bit of an abbreviated battle report since I did get to play a whole lot of Legion. I had a pretty rough day of Legion. It was a little disheartening. On day 1, I took a quick round 1 against a player, an opponent who was a little bit less experienced than me. He was here to kind of like not just learn the game, but it was his first like big competitive tournament. And so we had a pretty laid back game. It kind of went back and forth, but I had the thing locked away probably by about turn 4. And it was a pretty quick game. We both played it at a pretty nice clip. So we got to sit and take a few minutes before round 2. So I won my first game, was feeling pretty good. If you guys listened to our last episode, I had some pretty high expectations for myself going into Gen Con to try to nab one of those 3 invites. Game 2, though, took a turn. Game 2, I got to play Ben's round 3 opponent, Nick Freeman of the Impact X blog. A really nice guy. We had chit-chatted a bit before the tournament started. And we kind of figured that some point this weekend, once we both figured out that we were playing every day, we'd get to bump into each other. So might as well get it over in turn 2, or in round 2. We get dropped on this mat that, well, needless to say, was really bad for me. I was right at the hilt with 800 points that day, running the list that I've been running at this last several Knoxville and local tournaments, consisting of Luke and Leia. Leia's got no upgrades. Luke's got push and reflexes. 2 fleet troopers with concussion grenades, the extra body, the shotgun, and environmental gear. Leia also had environmental gear. 2 flamethrower ATRTs. 5 groups of rebel troopers with extra bodies, and 1 group without. So I was running 10 activation rebels. It's been pretty efficient for me, but these tables were pretty sparse. And not only were they sparse, but the rules on them were kind of hard and fast and not really open to interpretation. At one point, and I think one of the reasons that this game really slipped away from me, I was already really far behind, but I made this play where I tried to flank around with my ATRT and flank around this piece of impassable terrain with Luke, I tried to jump my Luke over this downed ATST. And because it was labeled as impassable, that means you can't walk over it. And even though Luke's base cleared the major obstruction on the base, the piece of cardboard that it's kind of all taped to, Luke's base didn't fully clear. And that was declared impassable. And so I physically couldn't put my base on it. And that slowed Luke down from getting into the battle a whole turn. Actually, really a turn, like 3 actions. And that put me really behind the 8 ball from what I was planning, because then my 2 aspects of my army hit at very different times, my 2 threats. And the rest of my army had nothing really to hide behind. And so Nick just kind of blew me off the table, and we chit-chatted a bit afterwards. And based on deployment, I didn't have a chance. And I took a really bad deployment because I didn't want to play key positions as the red player. So it was a tough game, where I felt I could have, maybe if some rulings and some terrain rules were different, and if there was a little more cover, I could have won. I gave him a game up until the end, but ultimately he did win. We were playing Sabotage the Moisture Evaporators.
Because I played on that on round 1 and round 3. And so I've got pictures of it up there. It's like I said, it was a rough placement if you were on the wrong side of the board. It felt like all the cover was in the wrong spot. My opponent Tim played on what I'm calling the wrong side of the board now. Was the side that Ryan played on in round 2 and the side that I played on in round 3. It was rough. That the terrain build on that was difficult to play around.
So I took a hard loss and decided to dust myself off and say, all right, we got 2 more days to do this. So I go into game number 3, and things are going pretty well. It's trading back and forth, and I'm about to get myself into a really great position. All I've got to do is survive 1 attack on my Luke from some bikes. And Luke's got a dodge token. Luke's taken 1 damage, so he's got 5 health left. And I'm feeling really confident with the dodge token that this group of bikes can't kill Luke. They probably will get 2 or 3 damage, but then Luke is going to be invincible the rest of the game by managing, using force push to manage who's engaged with me and who's not. Because it was a Veer's bike list, so there was no real threat of Vader. And the bikes come whipping around the corner like I expected them to. They blast into Luke. And he rolls with an aim token. He rolls all 6 hits. I was like, okay, I'll spend my dodge token to dodge it down to 5, pick up my 5 red dice. I just need 1 block or 1 surge. And Luke just blanks out.
That's crazy.
And at that point, the suppression war kind of got away from me, and I kind of got a little salty at that, hence the reason I don't have cool damage tokens. Not towards my player, just at the circumstance. And I did put myself in that position to roll 5 blank dice. So I can't just blame the dice. I put myself in that place to let the dice screw me. And I made some other timing mistakes with when I should have activated other units, and the game just slipped away from me. My opponent was awesome. He was really nice. He played well. I thought I had that game in the bag, and then it just got away from me. And then, like Ben said, we had an event at 9 o'clock, and since Legion was running a little late because we got started late, I went to my last opponent who had a pretty long day, and I said, hey man, let's play 2 rounds, and then I'm going to give you the game and go to this other event. And he was cool with that, Micah, and we played a couple rounds. We were both really tired, playing kind of slow. The game was in a weird space. I think I may have been able to pull it, but I wasn't really sure. 9 o'clock came around. I shook his hand and gave him the game. He got some cool prizes out of it. And I went to this weird Model UN Space Alien 120-person RPG and had a great time with a couple of friends and a bunch of strangers. Yelled at people. I was a member of Congress. I ran around chasing other congressmen, trying to get them to vote on things. We got, like real Congress, almost nothing done. It was a lot of fun. So my day 1 of Legion was 1-3. I was pretty disheartened at myself, like that whole night. Once I kind of like Gen Con slowed down and I got some food in my system, I was really, really beating myself up. But one of the advantages I had is I get to play multiple days of Legion, and looking at the tables and looking at how they rule the tables and what they said was like their philosophy behind list building, I got to make some changes to my list. So day 2 of Gen Con, I get to edit my list before we get to the convention hall. And I decide, you know what? There was impassable terrain, and there was only one thing on all the tables that I saw that counted as difficult terrain for troopers. And it was this big 90-degree like corner piece that sits in the corner of a board that was utterly worthless and utterly like useless. You physically couldn't use it in the game because models couldn't really balance on it.
It was super pretty.
It's looked fantastic. All the terrain from FFG that they had ordered looked great. But I don't know that it functioned well as Legion terrain, because Legion terrain needs to be interactable. You need to be able to climb it if you want us to use the climbing rules. It needs to slow us down if you want to incentivize us to take environmental gear. It also needs to be able to be balanceable. Like, there were some great looking hills on a lot of the maps that gave just like area light cover, but you couldn't put any minis on it because they would just kind of slide off. And so a lot of my opponents, we would just like kind of put models up there and say, hey, look, the squad is up there, and just kind of set them to the side because we knew we couldn't balance all, 6, 7 models on it. And everybody, most of my opponents were fine with that.
I had environmental gear on 3 models, and it was not, I didn't use it for anything other than hopping over barricades. So I didn't have to slow down.
Yeah, and you can get around that problem just with clever placement of where you put your unit leader. So going into day 2, I decided that I was the red player every game 1. I still managed to do the best of it, but getting to pick board edge was really valuable on these tables. It was really, really valuable. And so I decided I'm going to strip off my fleet troopers environmental gear, and that's going to give me a 6-point bid, when the biggest bid that I had faced on day 1 was, I think, 4 points. So I was like, I'm feeling pretty good going to the next day. I'll get to be blue a whole lot. And yeah, I did get to be blue a whole lot. So day 2, we come in, and they had realized that not everybody who bought a ticket for all their maximum firepower events, because they all were sold out, was going to show up. So they broke down probably a couple of tables and added the terrain they had on there onto their tables that they were going to be using. So that was great. There was a little bit more coverage on each of the tables. It was still not the best terrain for Legion per se, but it was definitely better. The other thing that they did is they had these little yellow slips that was labeled what was on every board and how it interacts with game effects. Was it heavy cover? Was it light covered? Was it difficult terrain? What special qualities did it have? And they had made several edits to those. And then they had also changed how impassable terrain works, to where now, instead of the whole block being just a giant no zone, it was now just kind of like you can't move linearly across it unless you can like balance your mini. And so it was really nice to see how, yes, they listened to our complaints about terrain. They listened to what we were saying, and they on the fly adjusted. And this was these guys' Gen Con too. Like, I'm sure they didn't want to leave the event at 11 o'clock that night and go and type up new terrain rules, but they did it anyway. Luke and Jeremiah, who helped facilitate, did an awesome job of listening to our feedback each day to be able to adjust the tables to what they needed to be.
I was really proud of them for that.
Yeah.
They took a little heat on the internet for it. And like the tables looked much better on Friday and looked much better on Saturday.
Yeah.
I was also kind of sad that, because I almost didn't get into Legion this year. All the tickets were sold out initially. Ryan did a really great job of scouting the internet. And once a ticket came open, he said, hey, Ben, go get it. And I bought it real fast for my cell phone. So that's one of the reasons why I only played one day, because I had assumed all the games were sold out. And so I probably would have played on Saturday if I thought that they were going to be open tickets.
Yeah, and so when you come to something like Gen Con, if maybe you've never been, or maybe you were somebody who wanted to come play Gen Con, or Legion at Gen Con, excuse me, and didn't, you can always carry those generics in your pocket. Granted, it's $20 worth of generics to get into these events, but chances are a spot will be open. The downside of that is if one isn't, that means you probably don't have something already scheduled on your whatever day you're supposed to be playing. So it is kind of a gamble. But yeah, there was I think there was 19, 21, and 20 players of the 32 each day. So there were quite a few open seats. And I also thought how it was consistent within 4 people of how many turnout we had each day. And I get why some people don't want to come to Gen Con and play Legion. There is so much going on. It started at an awkward time. It started at 11 in the morning. Registration started at 11, so you didn't really have time to go hit the dealer hall and get some demos and wait in line before you had to be in, but then we got out super late. So it did really sink your entire day. So it was tough.
By sync, you mean we played Legion all day and it was fantastic.
Yeah, it was. Absolutely. Well, I played Legion all day. You went and played other games.
I did.
But yeah, day 2, made a few edits to my list, removed some environmental gear, and got a bid. Still stayed at 10 activations, still stayed with trooper spam, and the heart of my list was the same. It was just a response to the tables. So this day I did a whole lot better, going 3-0 to start the day off. And, you know, if you were my opponent on Friday, I don't want to discredit during one of the first 3 rounds, but for an interest of time, I want to take a little bit of time and talk about my final game with Dustin Fraun, who's a Rune Wars. I think he was a top 4 or top 8 Worlds Rune Wars player. Played a really good game. He was playing Veers triple bikes and a bunch of troopers, and I think it was 5 storm, 1 snow. And we played on this kind of neat looking canyon map that had like no real hills for cover, but a lot of line of sight blockers that once again you really couldn't interact with. And we played capture supplies with, I want to say it was clear conditions and advanced positions. I did not take good enough notes. That is something that I'm going to work on for the podcast. The really cool thing about the game was we both kind of got to do what we wanted. We both kind of moved up and set our traps for each other. He funneled quite a few of my units into this alley where he decided to throw all of his bikes down. I got Leia and 2 groups of troopers, or a group of troopers and a fleet trooper to go flank and try to catch his Veers out, because I knew my plan was he's probably going to be able to get to the 3rd box. We each had our 2 boxes that were safe, but due to the way the map was set up, he could get to that 3rd box a little bit easier than I could. So he was probably going to get that. And then my goal was just kill Veers and start a mass rout. All I got to do is get him to panic and drop 1 box, and the game is mine. So we start trading in the middle of the map. I'm moving my strike team on Veers into position. He's moving his bikes into position. He gets a couple really good bike shots off. I do a good job of using the canyons to my own advantage for cover, getting some cool shots down. I get 1 set of bikes down, and then I move my fleet troopers in to catch one of his groups of bikes before it can really do anything. And I move some fleet troopers in to position to get a range 2 shot on Veers in the same turn. And man, if you guys have listened to our show, you know how fleet troopers can 100% just erase units. They can just throw all those white dice up in the air, and they can come clattering down for, I honestly believe, like their average is about 5 or 6 hits. I throw at the bikes with 1 grenade to get rid of their cover bonus and roll 4 hits, and he rolls 2 blocks. So I get 1 bike out of the deal. And I was like, well, okay, that's not great, but that's okay. His damage is now lessened. It's fine. And then I roll up to Veers and I move to get the range 2 shot. Veers is in the open. He's got no suppression. He's got no cover. I just pick up those 2 red dice and those 10 white dice and sling them and get 3 hits. And he gets 2 blocks. And my heart sank.
If you've listened to the podcast before, you know that Veers sometimes just refuses to die. This has happened to us. This happened with Ryan and I independently and together. And this is one of those days where Veers just refused to die.
So we both got to execute our strategies how we wanted to. He grabbed the 3 boxes that he had easier access to and just started kind of running away, while I had to tangle with his bikes. My strike team got up to... Luke was doing a good job dealing with the bikes, because the bikes aren't there to win the game. The bikes are there to distract me, and they were. I couldn't get Peg Veers down like I wanted to start that mass route, and then he got his snow troopers with a flamethrower in a really good spot. And then it was pretty much over from there. We both got to do what we wanted, and we both executed our strategies, which is really fun. Instead of one of us setting the tempo and the other reacting to it, we both got to do what we wanted, and it was a really close game up until it wasn't. And it was by far probably the most fun game of Legion I played all weekend. Even though I lost 2-3, it was a close game. It was a lot of fun. Justin put up a great win and well-deserved his invite to Adepticon. It was a pretty rad game. Ben, you didn't play Legion Day 2. What did you do?
I did not. I played X-Wing that day to less than stellar results. So last year I went top 8 taking home the R2D2 templates, and they're beautiful, and I show them off every time. The BB-8 templates this year I thought were actually better than the R2D2 ones. But with Legion and X-Wing 1.0 kind of being on its way out, I didn't put the practice time in. I didn't hone the list. I lost to what ended up being the meta for the day, the Reaper Inquisitor. I lost to a new Chewie and 3 Harpoon Zs. And I swear to God,
That's crazy.
it is crazy. And it was fun. It was all my fault. I thought I lined up and I didn't do it correctly, and I was a little short, and it was bad. It was my fault, though, but I love the guy for playing it. Like I said, sir, I hope you win the entire thing. And then my last list of the day I'm playing against is a barrel-rolling Saw Gerrera.
Madness.
I couldn't believe it. I took a photo of this list.
That's insane. Yeah.
I was like, what? And he just whooped me. He just whooped me hard. I shook his hand. I was like, sir, I told the last guy I hoped he won, but now I hope you win more. So I was 2-3. No way to advance to the second day. So I dropped the last class, or the last round. I had some cool terrain classes scheduled for that night. With Legion, I want to learn how to build good terrain, and they were lots of fun. And yeah, so I think we had dinner at the Ram that night, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself. So it was a good day. I didn't win, but it was good. So that was day 2. So that puts us Friday. Friday's done and capped. So Ryan, what does day 3 look like? Perhaps I'm told you may have won some things.
Yeah. So day 3, the pressure was on. I had super salty Thursday. I had a pretty good, made it to the final table to lose and come in second on Friday. So I got to mad scientist my list one more time. I got to make a few more tweaks. So I decided that I was going to drop my concussion grenades off my fleet troopers to get some more points for a bigger bid, and I upped my flamers on my ATRTs to rotaries, because with the way the cover worked for the tables, I would have rather had the more consistent dice from range, because things were rather wide open, since there weren't a lot of things to hide behind. Because the flamer, the big thing, you're paying the opportunity cost. You're not paying the point cost because it's cheaper, but you're paying the opportunity cost is to basically get 2 more hits in because you're ignoring that heavy cover. And since there wasn't a whole lot to hide behind other than barricades, I just decided I'm going to take the rotaries and I'm going to use them as suppression machines and plink some damage when I can and maintain my bid by dropping those grenades. So I maintained my 9-point, I want to say it was a 9 or I think that day was a 6-point bid. I kept environmental gear on Leia just so she could jump over barricades and still hide behind them, since she couldn't use cohesion to sling half of her unit like a fleet trooper could behind a barricade. So we start the day with me kind of putting a lot of pressure on myself in my own headspace. Legion started later in the day, so I had a lot of time in the morning to kind of worry about it. If you guys can't tell by listening to the show, I'm a bit of a tryhard. When it comes tournament time, I want to do well. I want to have fun, but I also definitely want to push myself and do well. And as fate has a cruel twist to it, I played some very interesting people on my 4-game journey on Saturday. Game 1 was against George Meadows, who had played a handful of times before, was borrowing a buddy's army of pastel painted stormtroopers, painted in clone trooper kind of styles. They looked really cool. He wasn't the most battle hardened tournament player, so we were just kind of kicking back, having a good time, cracking some jokes. This was probably my biggest mess up of the tournament. We played limited visibility, and at the end of the first turn realized that both of us on many occasions forgot limited visibility. So we just said, it's clear conditions now. Because I had shot with Leia's spaceship, he had shot with 3 groups of speeder bikes at long range, plus lots of DLT shots into my ATRTs. We decided that nobody really got an advantage from the messed up condition, and it wasn't worth calling a judge and trying to sort things out. So we just kind of went with it. We had a really good game. We played Disarray. It was, I want to say, the only time I got to play Disarray. I just didn't come up a lot. And we played Sabotage the Moisture Evaporators, and he put everything Vader, 2 bikes, Veers, and all but one of his trooper squads in one of the corners of Disarray. And then he put a 4-man squad of stormtroopers in the other. And I kind of had to follow suit. I put in Leia and 2 groups of my troopers, just regular rebel troopers, into the long edge away from him that could go through and pick up realistically 2 of the moisture evaporators that were kind of hidden away from the main engagement. And then I put everything else in directly across from his big army, and we just had a brawl. It was knockdown, it was drag out, and the only reason I kind of came out on top of that is I had some hills that I could stand 2 groups of troopers on that had light cover, and by the time they were suppressed, it turned it into heavy cover. And I managed to put these troopers on hills with their unit leaders in base to base with the moisture evaporator and everybody else in the hill. And I just stood tall there, using that hill for cover and getting a better use of the terrain. But it was a knockdown, drag out fight. And it was a pretty brutal bloodbath. We both threw a bunch of dice. It ended in a spectacular fashion with Luke and Vader. Luke jumped up on this rock spire to kill a group of stormtroopers because I wasn't really interested in tangoing with Vader until Vader decided to roll that white die and climb up there and try to fight me. And so we have just this little rock spire in the middle of our area where we're all fighting with Luke and Vader just fighting on top of it. And it was awesome. I managed to pull the win because I had 3 extra actions that were working on the 2 other moisture evaporators other than the 2 that were in the middle of this big skirmish. And that pulled it out for me. Him only putting 1 group of troopers to contest the other 2 didn't slow me down enough to swing the game. So it was a pretty close game, but ultimately I did walk away with it.
So let me stop here and ask you this question about disarray, because I never did see it myself. I also didn't see it very often in other people's games because I watched. I tried to look as much as I could. When you have objectives where you have to go grab them, should you spread your disarray out, pretty balanced?
Yes, you should. And I think that's one of the mistakes George made. But what he wanted to do, and we talked a little bit about it after the game, is he wanted to come and he thought his bikes were going to have a little bit more impact than they did, no pun intended, where he wanted to kind of swoop in, hit my main army with his bikes to soften me up, and then kick his 2 sets of bikes out to protect those other my flanking squads and keep them off the evaporators, and then win the fight straight up. And that didn't happen. So he was kind of that Imperial player that was trying to play defense for the tie, and it didn't work out for him.
Makes sense.
So got a good win, and it was a nice relaxed win. Like, me and George both had a really good time. We were cracking smiling jokes, and it really got me out of my own head. And so I'm indebted to George for that. I was a lot less hard on myself after that.
A little behind the scenes notice. So Ryan got up kind of early Saturday morning and kind of disappeared from the place that we were staying at. Didn't say a whole lot to a whole lot of people. In fact, got up long before most of us got up because that's how on edge he was about this. I don't know if you slept at all, honestly.
I did sleep well, but I don't sleep a lot at conventions because it's my one time to do it. And I wanted to make sure I had lots of time to get up, get a good breakfast, get some coffee in my system, figure out how I wanted to tweak my list, make sure that I can get to the hall and set up and have a whole lot of little things that I don't have to worry about, and try to do my best to get myself in a right headspace, which I think is for me at least really important.
There's also a merman in our bathtub. That's a long story we won't go into here, but
that's a long story we're not going to get into, but yes. But yeah, I did kind of psych myself out of it. So game 2, I got to play Billy Graham, the friend of the show, not the evangelical preacher. And I got to play Billy back at Adepticon during our kickoff games that we got to play, or the launch events. We played, I think, round 3, and my dice blew him off the table there. And so this is the strangest game of Legion I've probably ever played. And I was once again very happy, but yet not happy to have to make it's my last chance to make my 4-0 run, and I have to play a friend. So that means whoever I play also doesn't have a chance to do that. So I was like, all right, well, let's see what happens. The thing you need to know about Billy is he is the chillest dude you'll ever meet.
He's a fantastic man.
Yeah, he's a great painter and really nice guy. So I was once again very happy to play somebody who wasn't going to let me boil over, who wasn't going to let me. He was going to just be cool, be calm. We were going to chat, have a good time, and I'm not going to be able to psych myself out. And then before the game even starts, we play advanced positions, minefield, boxes, recover supplies. And there's this hill in the middle of the map where there's a box on it and nothing else really around the hill. So you get on the hill, you get light cover, but there's nothing else to really hide behind. And then we both get our 2 easy boxes that we get to place. So I'm running this kind of pincer, advanced position like flank. He's running just a couple guys off to the side to secure a box, and then everybody else looking at that hill. And he had Veers, ATST, 2 bikes that he used at a really good job to flank with, and then just a bunch of troopers with a bunch of upgrades. And then advanced position starts. As we start deploying, he sends his first group out towards a box, and he's like, you know what? I'm just going to trigger this mine. I'm going to get it over with. And he sends those troopers out, and he rolls the blank, so the mine doesn't go off. And now he doesn't want to commit any more forces over there, because if he moves out, then if that mine goes off, it's going to blow up everybody. So he's like, I'm not going to do that. So he puts 1 or 2 more squads over there, but they don't take the free scout, or they scout just up to the range 1 of the mine. Then his last deployment was Veers. And Veers drops in this area where he's within range 1 of his ATST, and he's really close to a barricade, and he's really close to a mine, because I put this mine right next to some cover that had a good line of sight to the hill that I knew I was going to have to rush. And Veers steps out to trigger the mine, which is honestly, I think, really smart. With Veers, he's got a big health point pool. If you take damage, it's not going to take dice away. And then Veers is just going to step back behind heavy cover and issue aim orders for the rest of the game. So if he takes 1 or 2 damage early on, it's not a big deal.
Makes complete sense.
Veers rolls the surge, which means the mine goes off twice. I was like, oh, Billy's a nice guy. I feel really bad now. We roll 4 hits. Veers rolls 4 blanks. It's like, oh, all right, it's now Veers on 1 HP. And because I'm a try-hard nerd and I feel a little bit bad about this, he kept telling me I shouldn't, but I do. We both play our 1 pip cards to shoot the ATST and shoot the spaceship with Leia. I win the roll-off and get Veers off the board before he can do anything. At the end of Leia's first activation, the first activation of the game, Veers is dead in the middle of a minefield with a giant scorch mark of a spaceship gun around him.
That is so gross.
Yeah. Now, that game, me trying to take that hill was something else. That was tough. It is something that they are going to have to put up some memorials for. I lost. That hill had a box and dozens of dead troopers on it. My activation count eventually got me there because I ran up there and everything I put up there just got annihilated by all of his forces. And so before I sent my 3rd trooper set up onto the hill to die, I whittled down his activation count to where I would probably just have 1 or 2 troopers left in the group that could go up and grab the box at the start or at the end of turn 6. And I used my superior activation count to get the day. He had some really great flanking speeder bikes that definitely gave me some pause, and I used an ATRT to give some fleet troopers cover and kind of range controlled them a little bit and controlled where they had to go around some terrain and around my ATRT. And it also made him put some shots into one of my ATRTs when he probably would have rather put them into troopers. And so I managed to pull that game in a really weird way, but he made it a way closer game than it should have been, despite the terrible, terrible start that he had. But it was really fun. Billy's a great guy. I cannot wait to go to the next convention. Hopefully he'll be at Adepticon and we can get another game in there. He's got amazingly painted models. I want to say he won the Saturday paint contest. His ATST has got this pixelated urban camo on it, and it's just awesome. Yeah, you guys should definitely check it out.
It was absolutely beautiful. I kind of want to take a moment here and break apart the more psychological aspect of this game. You see that Ryan's losses have always come where he's made some hot-headed decision, or he's gotten really salty. But on Saturday, he had 2 cool, chill opponents. And since you guys didn't tilt him, you guys weren't able to get the win, is what I'm saying. You got to play the psychological games with Ryan.
All right, yeah.
You let us down.
Wow. Will's throwing shade. All right, so round 3, fate gets even crueler. I drew the other person I didn't want to draw who was playing that day, and I draw Chase Smith. If you're a longtime listener to the show, you know that Chase Smith was my partner in the team battle at Adepticon back in March. And he was also my partner for the team event that was going to be less than 12 hours away. And we have to square down. We both want the invite. We both want it bad. We faced off on a map that definitely favored me because he was running a fully loaded ATST, and there were some big line of sight blockers in the middle. We were playing intercept transmissions, and this big line of sight blocker in the middle, the transmission tower went on top of, and on Chase's side of it, you had to like come around a corner and be in base to base to get close to it. While on my side, it was a little bit closer because it was just off center a little bit, so I could claim that middle point easier. And then since we were playing major offensive, we both pretty much had the other tower in our deployment zone. So it was I could just throw my group of 4 troopers to sit there and take dodge standby tokens and hold it and shoot at anything that comes close. And he could kind of do the same. And so it was really a fight over the middle point. And as fate would have it, we go in at each other. The terrain favors me a little bit, and I baited out what I'm gonna say because we talked about it, but a rookie mistake. Chase took an aim token when he shouldn't have. He should have marched his stormtroopers up to be 1 action closer on turn 1, so that way on turn 2 he could have moved again and been closer to the transmission tower. But he got greedy, took the aim token, got some more damage out of it, but it put him in action behind. And he also kept Veers a little too far back for too long, to where on the first scoring round, I was able to score both my point and the middle point. When you really want to, at least on that first score, I think everybody's goal is just to tie it up. And it put me ahead on the race. And then once we actually started kind of engaging, I got a couple really good rolls, and he blanked out on a couple really, really silly rolls that he shouldn't have. And the battle swung my way. But the thing you have to understand about Chase is like Ben. Chase will not let you go into your next game fresh. Me and Chase were still playing turn 6 when it was an ATST that was damaged versus my remaining 6 activations. They were battered and bruised 6 activations, but I had gotten everything else of Chase's off the board, and it was just an ATST left, and he made me play it out. I did get that ATST. I used that keyword for the impact if you're behind it to great effect. But I did claim victory over of the Trans Tennessee Alliance, and got to go once again to the final table, where who would be waiting for me yet again but Nick Freeman from Legion Impact X. Really great guy. We had been watching each other's progress, and to a degree, what happened to me on day 1 happened to him now. He was asked the internet what list he should play, and of course the internet gave him a trolley list, and each progressive day, Nick was playing I'm not going to say a worse list, but a less consistent list. And so when I met him, he managed to go 3-0, which kudos to him for going 3-0 with nothing but a fully kitted Vader and 6 fully kitted snowtroopers. I mean, it's only 7 activations, but it's 7 really efficient activations, because if you've listened to our show for a while, you know that the way to deal with snows is just to tag them down with suppression and try to get hostile environment, and they'll run out of actions because they're overpowered if they have all their actions and they're underpowered if they don't. And with his entire army being snowtroopers, it's really difficult to suppress all of them. But I knew that key positions was in the middle column. He had like a 50-point bid, so obviously he was blue. I burned both of my vetoes to make sure we didn't play key positions, and so we played Sabotage, the Moisture Evaporators. I played that a lot this weekend, or Gen Con weekend. And then we played Minefield with Clear Conditions, I want to say it was. I remember him getting rid of the first column of rapid reinforcements because he didn't want me to flank with my fleets, which I really would have liked to have done. The game starts off, the mines definitely go my way. I got a couple good mine hits, and then Leia got a really clever shot through some terrain with her 1-pip card. We were playing Long March, and so it was just a box of death that these snowtroopers are just rank and file moving up with Vader. But the terrain was a little bit more favored to me since I was a bit faster. I could take the hills that were in the middle and get their cover benefits. He had flamers, and so I had to try to do as much damage as I could before he could close that distance. but I used these hills and some fleets and Luke to great effect to draw a lot of hate while he was trying to just get his moisture evaporator secured. He was doing the cutesy things where he steps out of cover with his snows, shoots, and then steps back in. But 10 activations is more than 7. And I did a pretty good job of keeping Luke and Vader away from each other until Luke or Vader was just one tap away from being dead. We were both really mentally exhausted, and that snowtrooper list is something you kind of have to play perfectly. And we were both kind of wore out. We both made a couple silly mistakes, and I got the 4-0, taking the top spot, securing my Adepticon invite. I would have liked to have done it with against a more of a competitive list with a more balanced terrain, because the terrain definitely favored my list. But he also got the drop on me on day one, kind of in the same circumstance where there wasn't much we could do from the start of the game. I think we both agreed at the end, like, we can't wait for Chicago. Hopefully we'll get to play a straight up game and birth a rivalry. It was a fun day. Everybody I played was awesome. You know, I got the top spot finally. The icing on the cake was by Saturday, all the really good painters had already won painting awards, and so they said, "Hey, don't give them to me." And somehow I snuck out with the second best painted army. And if you guys have looked at our Instagram feed or seen any of my models, you know that they're ugly as sin and not deserving of things. But Will, you've won a painting award, correct?
I have indeed.
I've won a painting award. Ben, have you won a painting award?
Once in the 2nd grade, I was nominated by my elementary school, and it was taken down to the city hall, and it was placed in city hall. So yes.
For painting?
For painting. I painted a yellow dinosaur. It was quite beautiful.
I don't know if we're counting finger painting, though.
Well, my models kind of look like finger painting, so I think we'll take it.
I was going to say, yours look like a finger painting project.
So when Ryan texts me that he has won the 2nd place painting award contest, and remember, this is I have played Legion, I painted Legion. I lost a contest because someone voted for not Ben. So I may have sworn to a beer and then said that there was no God. That this is clearly an unjust universe. That we live in the worst timeline. That I want to go to the other timelines. I need a portal machine, because this is clearly the worst.
I got some salty messages.
But yeah, it was a really rad event. I was really happy to go 4-0. Finally got to kind of breathe easy and then go find my friends who are having actual fun playing games instead of just psyching themselves out of their own heads. And that was my Saturday. Yeah.
That's all I did Saturday. I was supposed to go play in the Imperial Assault event. I didn't bring any map tokens, and I didn't bring any maps. So I was like, so I got a refund, and just wanted to go play the halls. I played a ton of demos that I really enjoyed. I bought a beautiful illustrated Edda, as translated by and signed by the guy there at the convention. It was fantastic. And then I went to go eat at a German restaurant. That's why I had the beer in my hand. I had a fantastic pretzel. It was delightful. And then we go back to the convention center. We're going to play some more games. We played Everdell, which is a very nice, very fun game, very interesting game. And Ryan's like, guys, I'm really hungry. Do you want to come celebrate my victory? I was like, you're painting victory? We've already had dinner. Sorry, sir.
So I went and got my victory 4-0 Adepticon ticket punched victory at a food truck by myself. It was awesome. I was not by myself for long. I quickly made friends, because that's what you do at Gen Con. You go and you talk to people.
Yeah, it really is what you do. It's like, may I share this table with you? It's 90 degrees outside, and I would like some shade. Absolutely, stranger. Come talk to us. No one is a stranger at a demo table.
So I had some random strangers congratulate me on my X-Wing win, even when my friends would not. Or my Legion win, excuse me.
We congratulated you once. That was all we gave you. We gave it to you once. Congratulations. I even gave it to you again on Sunday. On Sunday, I gave it to you. So,
but yeah, it was pretty rad. So at this point, Ben has played. How many demos did you play Thursday through? You played 4 games of Legion on Thursday, some X-Wing on Friday. Saturday, how many demos do you think you got to play?
I probably did 9 demos. I would just hop from booth to booth, like, show me your stuff. And to break out to show me what you got. I enjoy the demo process. Ryan will say I'm an easy sell.
He's a really easy sell.
He is a really easy sell.
I only bought, I think, 3 new games. I bought expansions for other games, but I spent a lot of time at CMON games because they had a whole bunch of test games coming out there. I played the Firefly tabletop kind of demo game. I did probably 9 demo games that day. It was lots of fun. Lots of fun.
So Ben's played a bunch of games. I've played one game. Sunday comes around. What do we do on Sunday?
I played more demo games in the hall.
Yeah, you got to go play more fun, interesting games. I reunited with my brother Chase for the Trans Tennessee Alliance, and we played the team event because I needed to play more Legion. So it was a 1,200 point game, same list building restrictions and requirements as the 800 point game, but you bring 2 600 point armies. The wrinkle is you each bring whatever you want. And we thought we were both going to have to play Rebels because Chase has an army for both, so he was going to bring his Rebels just for the team event. But it turns out we can mix factions. So we were team Dinner Date because we had the Dinner Date and Bespin team with Vader, a bunch of troopers, and some bikes. Luke. We did not have Leia. Luke with an ATRT and a bunch of troopers. And then they also told us that morning or the night before that if we managed to pick up Han or Commandos, they were also legal for the team event. So I popped open my Han, put him on the table, popped open a set of Commandos, and ran the 2-man sniper team plus just a 4-man squad with no upgrades. And our goal was to use Jedi Mind Trick on Luke, Han's double shot, and Vader's Master of Evil to just pepper the board with as much suppression as we could. Just all the suppression, all the places, all the time. That was our goal. And we had a pretty rad setup to do it. We had the sniper to put out suppression out of limited range. We had Mind Trick. It was all there. All the tools were there. And then we draw our opponents. Our opponents were Tim and David. Really nice guys, really cool guys who were running 3 ATRTs and an airspeeder. And you know what those things don't care about?
I don't think you told me this story.
They don't care about suppression. So we're playing intercept transmissions on advanced positions, and because the model count was so high, the game kind of takes a while. But I got my Commandos on top of this rock spire to where they are just super safe and super chilled. My opponents were running Luke, Leia, a handful of troopers, and a bunch of armor. We had a few DLTs, but that was really it. And man, was it a knockdown drag-out game. Vader pretty much single-handedly, with the help of, I think, 1 DLT shot, kills their snowspeeder just by saber throwing it a whole bunch, which isn't really how we wanted to use Vader. Luke doesn't really fight anything, but just uses the terrain to safely traverse and flank around to get into their back line, where I start mind tricking things away. And they tried to set up traps with standby tokens, and I would just run into melee, and which doesn't let standby trigger, or I would use mind trick before I would move to put suppression on them. It was an absolute bananas game, an absolutely silly game. But the dumbest thing that we absolutely had was my commando snipers kept missing, and Han is ridiculous. Han dealt like 4 damage all game, so he didn't really do a whole lot. He passed out a bunch of suppression, and he refused to die. I put emergency stims on him and duck and cover, and that's all he had. And all 3 of his command cards won us the game. We managed to win the game by really snowballing it on that 3rd scorer, but it came down to the point to where Chase had like 1 or 2 groups of piddly little stormtroopers with like 3 models in between them, and we managed to get Luke down by activating both Vader and Han and having them have face-up tokens. Han played his 2 pip card that says you have to shoot at him, and our opponents didn't quite realize how that card worked. And so they had 2 squads of troopers and 2 ATRTs had to shoot Han. And the ATRTs were Han was out of their arc. So instead of rolling 5 black dice to knock some of our troopers off of objectives, they had to waste shots at Han, who had already reached his damage capacity, but thanks to emergency stims was still alive until after his turn. And so they were super disincentivized to shoot at him because they knew as soon as he activated, he was going to die. Han used his make them pick up a command card and play a different one to keep my fleet or to keep my commandos alive because Leia was ready to shoot them with a spaceship. And I made them pick that card back up. I used the 0 for us to activate Vader to kill the Snowspeeder before I got to do another damage. Like all 3 of Han's cards were super high impact. And I think without Han, and if I put Leia in that spot instead, we don't win that game. It was super fun. Our opponents, Tim and David, cursed our names, and I told them, before you curse our names and say bad things about us, I need you to go home and do the same dirty tricks that we just did to you with Han. He's like, okay, well, I'm going to curse your names today, but I'll praise them tomorrow when I get to go home and do this to my friends. So it was a pretty silly team event. We only got to play 1 round, but it was a lot of fun. It was a whole lot of fun.
So you became the enemy of somebody's car ride home?
Yep, absolutely. We were having a good time, but they were absolutely upset because the funniest part was when we had Han and Vader's tokens up, which meant that they could shoot at either one. They wanted to shoot our Vader. And so they got to do that for a time until the situation was right for Vader, who was almost dead, to go and clean up their Luke. And Vader moves in and does all that. And they had been getting to shoot who they wanted. And at this point, after Vader went, only Han's card token was face up. And so due to Han playing his 2-pip card, they had to shoot Han. And he picks up to not his 5 black dice with his ATRT to kill a lowly stormtrooper who had a suppression token. That was the only thing he was hiding behind as he was scoring a victory point that round. And he picks up his dice and he takes the aim token and he says, I'm going to aim and shoot this guy. And I said, no, you're going to shoot Han. And he's like, haha, that's very funny. He rolls his dice and he goes to pick up his rerolls with his aim token. I said, no. You are going to shoot Han. And he thought I was just like hanging on to a really bad joke. And he rolls in with his rerolls into 5 black hits. And I just have to take Han's 2-pip command card and like put them over his black dice and say, no, you need to shoot Han. And he pauses and he reads the card and he looks at me. He looks at his firing arc, and then he starts getting kind of a little, like we were joking and laughing, but I could tell he was a little upset because that was a really great roll. And he takes his 2 white dice, throws 2 regular hits that Han's suppression and low profile just took away. Han took another suppression, and play got us another victory point. That was probably the funniest moment on why they will curse our name.
Is it too soon to go ahead and ask that Han is OP and should be banned? Too soon?
No, because Han's cards are silly. Han's abilities are silly. He refuses to die. He doesn't do that much damage. He throws 2 red dice with Pierce 2, sure, but if you got something in heavy cover with a dodge token, like, he's not going to be able to damage it. He's going to put out suppression, not damage.
But Ryan, we've said this many times on this podcast. Is this a game about doing damage?
Nope.
It's a game about objectives.
Game about objectives. You're right. But no, I don't think Han is broken. He's way more expensive than Leia. He needs a few upgrades to kit him out, so he's going to come out to about 140. I think he's fine. I think he'll be brought a lot back in line once we get his counterpart, Boba Fett, whose stat card is just bananas. He might not have the utility of the command cards, but his stat card is way better than Han's. So Ben, what'd you do on Sunday other than play demos? You just played demos, didn't you?
I just played demos.
Right.
I bought things I probably shouldn't have bought. I bought. Yeah. I had a good time. It was good. Had some fantastic Jamaican jerk chicken. Ooh, so good.
There you go. To put in perspective what my Gen Con kind of looked like for those of you that have been before, I spent 2 hours on Sunday, not even 2 hours, about 90 minutes on Sunday in the dealer hall, and that's all. Everything else was Legion, and only Legion. So it was a good vacation, to say the least.
I'll say for me, it was a much more balanced affair. Last year with X-Wing, because I won and then I kept winning, which I know sounds like a bitter complaint. But it took up everything I had on Thursday and Saturday. I think Friday was the only day I really had in the demo hall, and I had some other games scheduled. So yeah, I mean, and that's 2 different sides of Gen Con. You can go and try to experience a little bit of everything, a nice buffet, or you can dig in deep into a single dish and still have great fun. I love my Gen Con experience this year, and I loved it last year.
So I guess to wrap up Gen Con for this segment, kind of get you guys' closing thoughts, and let's have you say your favorite game and opponent for the whole weekend just to kind of wrap this up.
Yeah, it was a great Gen Con. I really enjoyed my last game with Justin. It was hard fought. We both intimidated each other with some flamethrowers. It was a good game for me as far as Legion goes. Best game I demoed all weekend was probably Rise of Tribes. It's going to release sometime in the next couple of weeks, but I really liked it. It's beautiful, super intuitive, great game mechanic system. I really liked it. So if you haven't taken a look at it, try to watch a video on the YouTube because it was quite fun. As far as FFG at Gen Con, it was quiet this year. They weren't releasing a whole lot of new games. Everything had been announced a while back. So X-Wing 2.0 was coming out, and they had great games played. I watched some of them from afar, but it was just kind of quiet. They didn't have a whole lot of new models to show us. I think we saw did we see the Wookiee Commandos?
Yes. Yeah, we did. They were on display.
I mean, they showcased a giant ship for a game that I'm never going to play or buy, but it was quiet as far as FFG goes. They didn't have any really new board games for me to play and try out, so it was, like I said, it was a good Gen Con. I really enjoyed myself.
But Ben, the Clone Wars.
So that was a great announcement, and I loved it, but they didn't show me anything from it.
Yeah, they didn't really tell us anything.
It exists. Trust us.
Yeah, my favorite game probably on the weekend was the finals of day 2 with Dustin. That was a great game. It was close. It was hard fought. There was emotions on both sides. It was probably the closest game that I got to play that weekend, maybe ever. It was just a absolute ton of fun. But I think the MVP for the weekend is a big shout out to Jeremiah and Luke for putting up with us for so long, and especially me and Nick, who were there all day, every day. Jeremiah did a great job judging, and Luke did a good job of keeping us in line. I had a bunch of weird rules questions that are just things that like I had never thought would come up, like how does Pierce and Guardian work together? He walked us through that, and they were just on their feet all day. They didn't get to have like a vacation like we did at Gen Con. They were just work. And it was great to get to know them, to meet them, and watching them adapt to the terrain issues day to day, making it better and better and better and better, and listening to us to show that they care and that they're listening. And I did hear some murmurs going around flight control that key positions is a problem and may be addressed. So it's on their radar, people. Keep yelling how key positions doesn't work, and we may see it fixed.
Yeah, I really have to give a shout out to Jeremiah. He worked super hard. He's a super nice guy. And normally I don't trust a man from Louisiana.
Whoa now.
You know, it's very difficult to find 12 men who think stealing's a crime down there. But Jeremiah was just great people. He was constantly helping us out. Like, the terrain was an issue on day 1. It really was. And part of it is because we all come with our own ideas on how to run terrain. And if you've listened to this podcast for a while, you know I have some very specific ideas on what a table should and should not be. And it was just much lighter than a lot of us expected. From day to day, I could see Jeremiah trying to fix ideas or plan or to play with the terrain to make it better, to make it a little bit more fair on both sides, to give options to both sides, no matter which side you end up on with your deployment zones. He really did a great job. FFGOP, the organized play guys, they work like dogs, and they were really good for all the events, for Destiny, for IA, for X-Wing, for Legion, for those Lord of the Rings players, for all the Arkham guys that are out there. I saw them. They worked hard. So I got to give a shout out to them as well. Wade, your people did good work out there. So now that our Gen Con's wrapped up, let's go back to what we normally talk about. Let's talk about the start of the game. We've talked about our deployments, our battle decks. And you know, with this Gen Con, and we've talked about it a lot, we really need to take a look at bids. So Will, you haven't talked in quite some time. What do you think about bids in Legion?
So I think we briefly touched bids a few episodes ago. We briefly mentioned them when we were talking about list building, but I think one thing we might have kind of done is, through our X-Wing experience, assumed a lot of our listeners really understand, you know, when we say taking a bid, doing stuff like involving a bid, you know, to us it makes perfect sense that you take these bids and you earn like opportunity by taking less points in your list, but I think we didn't do a very good job explaining why you do this. So that's kind of why we're doing this today. That being said, bids have never been a huge factor for me, which might explain my results, but...
Lack of success?
Results. The reason is I try not to attach myself too much to, like, needing a bid to work. And, like, you know, I don't build a list and go, okay, this list needs, you know, it needs blue player, it needs this deployment. Otherwise, you know, I'm like an auto lose. because I feel like flexibility is more valuable than that when I'm building a list. So I usually don't think about a bid until I've constructed a list that I like, which might be the opposite way that you guys are going to start looking at it now that you've had your Gen Con bid experience with a larger crowd, I guess.
I didn't really worry about bids beforehand. I mean, I would be 796, 797, 800 even. I occasionally dip as low as like 794-ish until this event. I guess because the first real, outside of Adepticon, we were all kind of learning the game, the first major outside event. And it was eye-opening. And it's not just key positions, because I mean, there's only one game of the 4 I had actually had key positions. But it made me see, it's like, oh, I don't really have a whole lot of control over this because it's not my battle deck. And so I'm looking if I want to be able to influence that, or to make sure, because key positions is out of my battle deck. I don't like it. I don't like it for my opponent. And for casual play, it's definitely gone. So I'm probably going to look at trying to keep a higher bid, maybe 7 to 10 points, just so that I can control it's my battle deck.
Yeah, I think more than just the battle deck. I think we're going to start to see some very aggressive bids, because I think Will said it really well. You're paying points not for upgrades, but for opportunities. This was the first time in a very long time where we didn't build the maps. We weren't organizing the tournaments. We weren't, having a direct say on what the battlefield looks like. More than the battle deck, more than the objectives, picking your board edge is so important, especially kind of like on day 1 and 2 when the terrain was progressively getting better and better, but it wasn't quite there yet. When the terrain can win or lose your games, I lost one game on just terrain because I couldn't do anything with it. And I won 2 games once I put a bid in my list, just because my opponents sat down and were so out of position because I got to veto the only good deployments that were for them, and I got to choose the board edge that was helpful for me. When you don't have control over the tables, that bid is humongous. And since we don't have time to do the competitive setup where we put all the terrain to the side and take turns putting it out, even at this FFG event, they had it set for us, which was fine because we would have needed even more time to play. And we were already there pretty late. So I think a 10-point bid is what I'm going to call an aggressive bid. And I don't mean that's an egregious bid. It's a bid where you're like trying to actually prioritize getting blue player. Also, knowing if your list needs a bid is really important. Spoiler alert, you do. You absolutely need a bid, because you've got those unknown table conditions, unknown table edges, and you don't know what you're going to be playing against. Getting to pick where you start is super huge. So when trying to put a bid together, my advice to you guys would be to get your activations where you want them, to get the tempo that you want, and then strip everything away from your list that you don't need and go from there. And then slowly reintroduce upgrades like extra bodies, like grappling hooks or environmental gear or grenades. Those things that you can live without, that don't define your list, up until you get around 790 or wherever you want your points to be. And then once you pass that like 790 point, just stop adding those extra little flare upgrades, and you should stick there. But strip your army down to its bare bones and slowly build it back up to where you're comfortable with it. But you are going to want to bid. Once I dropped just 3 points off my list for day 2, I was blue player every game of day 2.
I threw grenades into the list. I think I used them twice the entire time in all 4 games. They're nice to have when you need them, but I didn't use them for most of it. And that would have been a bid for me to guarantee I get the side that I want and the battle deck that I want.
So bear that in mind when you're list building. I think it's less impactful when you're building the tables, but as a TO, you also shouldn't like abuse that power. If you know like the night before what your tables are going to look like and you build a list for that. Usually I know what my list is going to be before we show up on Friday nights to set up for our Saturday tournaments. That way I can't try to build my list to the tables or the tables to my list, because we have the fact check of all 3 of us working on tables on Friday nights. But yeah, bids are going to be important, and also ultimately it's up to you guys. It's up to the Legion meta to determine where the bid point is going to be. But I'm going to guess it's going to be around 10 points is where the aggressive bid comes into play if you really, really want to prioritize blue player.
One thing that I was going to bring up is that I don't much like the concept of spoiler bidding, where you kind of take like a 10 or 11 point bid just so like you run into somebody who needs key positions. Is it worth taking a bid that you don't need to say, I'm going to run into someone who really needs their bid and hopefully mine's larger and I can mess up their like structured plans? Like, do you think that's an idea that's worth it? Or
I'm going to be mean and maybe Ben can put some mittens on me. If you are building a list that requires a bid because you're gaming for just one or two objectives, you're probably going to not do well at the tournament because someone there will have a bigger bid than you. Someone will use the vetoes in a pattern or in a way to make sure you don't get what you need. Your list, even with a bid, should be able to compete, maybe not be optimized, but be able to compete in every deployment for every objective. Not the ones that are just in your battle deck, but that are available because you may have to hit it. So I don't think there's anything such as a spoiler bid to make sure, because at the start of the game you still take one of your battle cards out randomly. And so you never know what that's going to be. If it might be the one that you really want may not even be available at all. So I don't think there's much need for a spoiler bid.
There comes a point where you're spiting yourself by going too far into your bid. There is. And so I think it's normally those last 10 points tend to be the accoutrements you add on. It's the grappling hooks. It's the, environmental gear. It's the emergency stems. It's the small things, which are nice. Like I said, give you the extra rerolls, but they're not always necessary, or you're not going to use them often enough to value their point worth.
Yeah. And just as a reminder, Nick went 3-0 going to the final table on day 3 with a 50 some odd point bid. So you have a little bit more wiggle room than you thought you might.
Clearly, we should declare him, our Legion Lord. But
I'm not ready for that yet. We'll talk after Adepticon.
Yeah, come back in 6 months. It's fine.
Well, if you want to take a look at all of our great photos from Gen Con, our most recent events, go check out our Instagram. I post as much as I could. I didn't have a whole lot of time between rounds. We did not take meal breaks at Gen Con. Jeremiah was good about keeping the rounds going as fast as they could. Pairings came quick. So I posted as much as I could. You'll see a lot of pictures of the boards that I played on or boards around me from day one there, and a couple other photos from Gen Con. I was really quite busy, so I surprisingly didn't post as much as I thought I was going to. But check out our Instagram. That's where we put all the cool stuff.
While you're checking out our social medias, check out our Facebook, Twitter, like Ben said, our Instagram. We have an iTunes page. We'd really appreciate you to rate us well there. Gets us more visible. At all these websites, we are at SW Stabcast.
You can also check out our shirt shop, get some cool Stabcast swag to help support the show at teespring.com/stores/Stabcast. We'd also love if you dropped us a line at swstabcast@gmail.com for our regular Q&A segment. We'd love to get some listener questions, have you guys pick our brains on what you want us to talk about. You should also check out the Legion Discord server because the Invader League is coming back. Registration is going to be the 19th through the 30th of August. It's going to be an awesome event. The prize pool is bigger than last year. There's more sponsors. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. And also keep a lookout for our Twitch at SW Stabcast, where I'm hopefully going to be able to cast some more games of the upcoming Invader League come September. So it'll be a good time, and keep your eyes locked there.
Speaking of our Q&A section, we have received communications from the Outer Rim. Starting off with, we do want to give a quick shout out to David Zelenka from his WordPress blog, yavinbase.wordpress.com. He's the one that interviewed you?
Yeah, he did a Q&A with a handful of people from Gen Con, both me and Dustin, who won day 2. I think he's going to be putting up some more interviews that he got in the coming weeks. And it's a cool blog about helping people get better at Legion from a dirty rebel perspective. It's a pretty nice little blog.
He took beautiful photos of my minis that did not win painting contests, but he took beautiful photos of them.
And also mentioned quite a bit during the battle report section, but Nick Freeman at LegionImpact.com. Great site. Sure, check it out. We'll see if he and Ryan become eternal rivals, or who knows what'll happen.
Who knows? Good guy, good blog. You guys should definitely check it out.
And we've got some listener questions. The first reads, My dearest Stabcast, As you know, I love you three sweet boys as if you were my own sons. But are you going to apologize for the remark Will made a couple episodes back about the schmucks who printed their own moisture evaporators? I'd hate to start a boycott this early into your podcast career. From Scott, the Grandpa Marler. So, at this time, I would like to formally apologize to everyone who was offended by my remarks about FFG making you all look silly and wasting your time with your fancy 3D printers. Except Scott Marler. To you, I will never apologize.
You know, after all the recent news about poets apologizing for the work, I stand for the artists and their art. So, Will, we apologize for nothing.
Nope, not apologizing. Not going to happen.
Thank you for standing with me. We have a second question that's actually a question. Says, hey guys, Sunsphere South reporting in. I have a question for you as experienced tournament convention players. What sort of prep work do you do to make sure you are ready to be on your feet all day at a convention hall? Any tips for people who haven't made the jump to large all-day events? Do you bring snacks, wear special shoes, etc.? Big fan of the show. Keep up the good work. From Drew, Low Sodium Cotton Gym.
So, as the slightly older player here in the group, like I said, I've said before, I'm a little bit older than the other two. I do wear good shoes. I make sure my tennis shoes are in good shape. I do have inserts on them because you're on your feet a lot. I cannot play Legion or X-Wing or any of these games while sitting. Ryan does a really good job of stocking us up on snacks, but I tend to be the pack mule that carries them in. Bring a little sport drink. Make sure you got your electrolytes that feed the plants. Low blood sugar, a caffeine craving, hunger, they'll throw your game off. If you're dehydrated, you'll get that headache, and you really just can't concentrate as well as you would like. So you got to stay hydrated, got to stay energized, and that will normally carry you through a day. The meal break is never long enough. They'll claim it is. It's almost never long enough. So you're going to eat probably afterwards. So stock up early, have a snack that'll carry you through. That's my method of, being mediocre.
Yeah. Stay hydrated. That's the biggest thing. Grab a Gatorade or a Powerade for about halfway through. Eat some protein bars and maybe some mixed nuts or something. Maybe a little. I think the biggest lifesaver that I've started using are just those little juice cups to give you a little spot of sugar when you need it. But other than keeping like your body where it needs to be and well hydrated so you can operate, I really think you need to take two things in consideration. And you need to keep your mind calm. You need to keep your mind clear. This is something that I'm always in a struggle with because I can put a lot of pressure on myself. I can let things bother me. Take time outs. Go sit in a corner by yourself if you need to. Like, I'm an introvert. These big events sometimes can get to me after a long day. So I'll go sit in the corner by myself, maybe put some earphones in for a minute or two, take some deep breaths. Take whatever time you can to sit calm or center yourself, whatever you want to call it, to make sure you're in the best mind frame you can be. One of the other big things that can help lead to that is know your list, people. I don't think because list building isn't as diverse as it's going to be as it could be in something like X-Wing. All of our lists are kind of the same right now with just a few variations, but make sure you know how to play your list. That way you're not wasting all your mental energy trying to figure out the optimal move. Make sure you've got a bunch of reps in so whatever situation your enemy's going to put you in, you've already been in before and you know how to react properly, so you can spend all of your effort and energy on trying to stop your opponent from doing what they want to do instead of trying to figure out what you want to do. You will, without a doubt, do better with a less optimal list that you know how to play than a meta list that you just picked up. You'll do better with a bad list you know than a good list you don't. So practice, practice, practice. Know your list. Know how you want to play the game. It'll save you a lot of mental energy after playing 4 games in a row. It's not a big deal if you're on your local casual night playing 1 game, playing 2 games. But if you're going to play 4 games in a row, you need your brain on adapting to what your opponent brings, not figuring out what you're trying to do.
I know those of you just heard Ryan say that he's an introvert. And that is true. The thing is, though, when he and I, and Will to an extent, when we go to these tournaments, we tend to be social people. We want to get the good holy word out of our game. We want more people playing our games. We like to make friends, but it can be wearing on you. And so sometimes you just need that quiet spot. I'm a big believer in I don't check my phone during a game.
Oh, yeah.
Nope.
It's distracting. It makes you not concentrate on what's going on. It's just not a good thing. You're playing the game. Be there in your game and you'll do better.
I usually end up turning my phone off for most of the tournament.
Yeah, and also just little things kind of like making sure your phone is charged or you have a battery pack for it. All these little things that you might have to worry about throughout the day after 4 or 5 games can really, really wear on you. So like that day when I was kind of in a bad headspace after going 1 and 3, I left early to get coffee, to make sure my phone battery was charged, to make sure I knew where my list was, to have everything filled out so I didn't have to rush. So all these little things couldn't build up on me and affect my play.
Yeah, and I guess I'm kind of the onward out. I'm not usually super affected by, these convention games or, long X-Wing regionals where they take 8 or 10 hours.
I mean, because Will, he's a Ute. He's a Ute. He's so young. Us old folk, it takes the drain on us.
I mean, as long as I've got a good breakfast, I can usually keep my head in the game till the event's over. But you do want to still give yourself every chance you can to be more successful. So plan for these things, prep. One thing I always make sure to do is in the lead up to something like this, probably 4 or 5 days before, I start chugging down water every day, just because nothing is worse than like round 2, you get that dehydration headache and you're just like, ugh, it's one of the worst things. Giving yourself every opportunity you can to be more successful at events like this is definitely good things to plan for.
So Ryan and I were discussing throughout his weekend at Gen Con at Legion the different types of ATRTs. He had the ability to change out his list, and the terrain really influenced a lot of what we did. So we thought tonight on our Imperial Corners and our Rebel Cave, we take a look at the ATRT cannons, because there's a lot of flavor to that. So, Ryan, what cannon are you looking at tonight?
Well, if you've listened to this show, I feel like I'm saying that a lot tonight, but if you like this show and you've listened to me yell about things, it's all about that flamer. Now, I say that with the caveat, the date that I did go 4-0, I did pull the flamers out of my list, but I'm a still believer in the flamer. The flamer brings, while it doesn't bring the dice that the other weapons do from long range or the safety, it brings the mind games. It brings the pacing. You get to dictate how the game is played until your ATRTs go down. It brings the mind game because your opponent has to deal with this ATRT before it comes trundling into their front lines and flames things to death. It gives them a target they have to shoot at, they have to deal with, and they have to have an answer for. And you make your opponent, for usually the first 2 to 3 turns of the game, play your game. It opens up a lot of room for your infantry. While doesn't do the consistent damage that some of the other weapons do, it doesn't have the range that some of the other weapons have, it gets your ATRT out there to be a piece of mobile cover that when played right, and if you can get it into position, it can wipe entire units. But at the end of the day, it's not about its punching power. It's about the threat it puts on your opponent, and it makes them play your game to where you're not playing theirs. That's why I think the flamer clocking in at 25 points is such a value, because it's the cheapest option other than running it naked, which you can do, but it makes your opponent for a low cost play your game instead of you just playing points to up your own game.
In the game I had against Justin, the one I liked the most, he had snowtroopers with flamers and I had an ATRT with flamers, and we just kept threatening each other. He was afraid to walk into my ATRT because then I could easily walk into him, survive his flame attack, and set him on fire. And so what I did was I used it to create a wall, and we were good neighbors on that wall because we did not encroach on the demilitarized no flames. I tried to use my flamer to hide behind terrain. Like I made my opponent look for him. I was playing the psychological game because when it pops up and it's too close to you, all heck's going to break loose. And those dice, when they hit, they do terrible things.
Yeah, plus it once again, it comes down to the maps, and that's ultimately the reason that I took them out of my list, is because there wasn't a whole lot of cover on the maps. There was just a kind of you can see them, you can't see them line of sight blockers, and so I didn't get a lot of chance to really ignore that heavy cover, which is where the flamer really gets its value. And I will say I did feel on the last day when I had the rotary cannons instead of the flamers, people shot at my troopers a whole lot more. And by the time my troopers got to where they needed to be, there were a lot less bodies attached to them and a lot less damage on my ATRTs.
Will, what do you think? Is the flamer the way to go?
As a man who has been on the receiving end of flamers many, many times, they are really scary to see them trundling off the board towards you. But the one weakness these flamers have is against vehicles. So what I'm going to talk about is the ATRT laser cannon. It's only 3 dice, but it's 3 dice that'll do work. It's got that impact 3, murders other ATRTs at anything with armor. If your buddy's running 2 ATSTs, just bring 3 ATRTs with heavy lasers and watch them melt. But in any other case, it's really not going to be as effective as the other two. Whether it's the rotary, dishing out good damage against anything, or the flamer turning your infantry into formerly infantry. It's a really specialized weapon, so know your meta and use it there appropriately. One experience I did have with it, though, was against one of our local guys, Brett.
Enemy of the podcast.
He was shooting against this one unit leader. It's breakthrough. He's in Brett's deployment. In a ruin, he's got his heavy cover. And Brett's like, well, all I got is my ATRT here, so I'll try to shoot at him. And he throws his dice, and he gets 1 surge to crit and then 2 hits. And he's like, well, those hits don't matter. I'll aim them. And he rolls those 2 dice into 2 more crits. Straight up, not even surging, just 3 crits, which destroys that unit leader's dreams and life. It's just a bad experience.
So for me in the online systems, I'm a believer in the rotary cannon. I tend to mix bag. I'll play 1 flamer and 1 rotary cannon in my ATRTs. It's 5 black dice, and with an aim token, you tend to re-roll those surges. I can get 3, 4, 5 hits unless the black dice just hate me. You can take huge chunks out of opposing squads. It can light up a defenseless Vader. No evade token, Vader better run scared, and I can do it from range 3. Between the armor keyword on mine, I can take the return fire. Yeah, I'll get hit by DLT, hopefully only once, but does a great job on just about everything. It's a good medium place for it. The lack of impact, though, is the only thing that makes me a little afraid. T-47s, but with the armor and the cover, can shrug it off. I say can, because I don't believe the T-47 does much of anything else. Bikes, I think, are kind of the same way, because you tend not to roll crits with it. So, you've got some cover, will take care of some things. A dodge choke will take care of another one. It doesn't hit as hard on those vehicles, but it'll take out some squads from a good distance away.
Yeah, the rotary I put into like 2 camps is like the safe bet if you don't know what you're playing against. And I also see it as the commander killer. Of all the weapons, it is the best at killing commanders. And that can be really great to do from range, which, both these other weapons other than the flamer really give you options at long range. So I think if you don't know what you're walking into and you've got the points for it, the rotary is pretty good. Unless you want to take command of how the game is played, then take the flamer.
Ryan, how many T-47s did you see at Gen Con this year?
I saw 1 at the team event.
That's what I thought too. Didn't see a whole lot of them.
I want to say on Thursday there was 1, and that was the only one all weekend. So whoever did that, God bless you.
But didn't you both receive beautiful T-47 alt art prize cards?
Yep.
Not only that, I received a beautiful dual-sided Wedge Weiss plastic card, this fantastic spot gloss to put on the T-47 alt art that I'm now putting inside my bag.
I see some T-47 and maybe some Wedge use in my future. Now that I've clinched my spot at Adepticon, I'm going to start, my mission now is to experiment with the T-47 and really see if I can make it worth its money. Don't hold your breath, Internet. Don't hold your breath.
So, as we kind of wrap up here, I will bring it back to Gen Con. What do you think, what was the coolest thing you saw all weekend?
Before we get into this, Will, what was the coolest thing you saw at the game store all weekend?
He's putting me on the spot.
Yeah, we're going off script.
Oh, God. You can't see the flop sweat on Will's face. Neither can I, but I'm assuming that it's there.
Not much went on at the game store while y'all were gone. I mean, most of our local player base was off to Gen Con or was told everyone's at Gen Con, so they stayed home.
So you sat in a dark room by yourself?
It was only dark sometimes.
Okay, good talk. The coolest thing I saw at Gen Con was only Legion. I felt like there's this huge convention center, Lucas Oil Stadium, all these connected hotels, and I stayed in about the same 100 square feet for like 99% of it, surrounded by awesome people, playing with cool people, and a game we love. I did get to go to the in-flight report, and that was probably, other than all the Legion, the coolest thing I got to do. Their new card game Keyforge is a really interesting business concept, and I want to kind of follow it and just see how it does, because that is super, super intriguing. But yeah, that was the coolest things I saw, was just lots of Legion and lots of people who love this game.
So I saw lots of models. I saw lots of games being played. A lot of cosplayers. That's definitely something that's growing. I saw a lot of family cosplay. I saw a lot of different and interesting varieties all across there. But the best one I saw was this octogenarian just walking around. He had white hair, was wearing small glasses. He looked exactly like Stan Lee. He was dressed like Stan Lee, and he was wearing a name badge that said, "Not Stan Lee." And he was just cruising.
That's awesome.
He didn't have a bag in his hand. I don't know where he was headed. It may have actually been real Stan Lee. I don't know. But he was just walking around, just cruising through. So, best thing I saw there.
That's cool. But when we start talking about miscellaneous old people walking through hallways, I think it is time to log off a rather long episode here. So, as always, thank you everybody for listening to the Stabcast. Thanks to our producer, John Michael. And until next time, I'm Ryan Slawski, reminding you that you too can be an award-winning painter. Unless you're Ben.
I'm Will Heim. Painting competitions aren't that big of a deal, guys.
And I'm Ben Fowler, shaving my beard into a goatee, as this is clearly the darkest timeline of Ryan Slawski's still winning painting contest. Good night, everybody.
Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good one.
The last time Will spoke was 42 minutes ago.
To re-warm up my vocals or something.
La 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 la.
La 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 la.